Good morning and welcome to the Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship this Sunday morning here in Durham, North Carolina, on the ancestral lands of the Eno, Saponi, Sissipaha, Shakori, and Lumbee peoples whose descendants live in nearby communities to this very day. I am Reverend Jacqueline Brett, and whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever your race, gender, whomever you love, and wherever you are on your spiritual journey, we welcome you here. And if you're visiting with us today, we would so love it if you would place your name into the chat box where you are sure to receive a warm ERUUF welcome. And also, if you're visiting, please take note that we have the Inquirers classes for visitors and newcomers, which take place on Sunday mornings at 9:30 a.m. on Zoom, and you can find out more about those on ERUUF's website. And we also have classes for religious education classes for both adults and for our youth and children, and you can find the information about those on our website as well. So this Sunday morning, we are sort of back to normal, I would say. And so our lead preacher this morning and minister is the Reverend Deborah Cayer, and it is so wonderful to have her back here with us today. And so let us begin. Let us begin by simply centering ourselves. And wherever you are, let us all take a collective deep breath in together and let it out. And let us begin our worship with our prelude. Our opening words this morning are by David Breeden, who says, "We gather into this circle. We gather into this circle of care to dream, to envision, to embody and achieve the compassion we dream, the justice we envision, the dignity of each in an ever-growing circle of love and justice."
to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, one that welcomes multiple truths. Our first hymn this morning is Gathered Here. It's led by Lelena Romero, Jocelyn Neal, and Michael Slack. The words will be on your screen. You can sing along at home.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near. Spirit, draw near.
Good morning. I am Ann Verdine Jones, and I am one of the champions for our 2,500 Hours of Love initiative. I am so excited this morning. As of last night, we have pledged 3,280 hours, and we've logged almost 1,900 hours. That is so exciting. I suspect, however, if you're anything like me, we have a few more hours to log. So my challenge for you today is to take 1 hour out of this beautiful Sunday and log those hours. I'll bet that number would have risen for next week. So there are a plethora of volunteer opportunities on our website. Today, let's take a few moments to hear about some of those opportunities from one of our partner organizations.
Hello, Eno River community. I'm Tim Moline. I'm the program director for Step Up Durham. Really excited to talk with y'all about volunteer opportunities that we have. Step Up is a workforce development nonprofit. We support people to work, grow, and thrive. So we meet them at the place of that entry level of getting the job, then building their savings in their community, and then how do we help them become community ambassadors to transform their own communities? With me today is our fantastic employment counselor and Elevate lead, Kashmir Bentley, and she's going to talk with you about a couple of the volunteer opportunities that we have.
Thank you, Tim. He's already given me an introduction, but just a slight introduction. My name is Kashmir Bentley, and I am the Elevate coordinator along with an employment counselor at Step Up Durham. So the first part of our organization is our Step 1 phase, and that is where participants will go through a job training program, which will allow them to have the skills that they need in order to get a job. Volunteers are extremely important in this part of the program because they help us with our resume sessions. That's one thing we do during that program is make a nice, beautiful resume for our participants to have in order to apply to these jobs. And then also for our mock interviews, which is just a portion of our jobs week where they go through and practice job interviewing skills. So having volunteers for these parts of the program is important because it allows our participants to leave our jobs week and be ready to go into that job or career path that they need and confidently have those skills that are needed to fill those positions.
Awesome, thanks. And so if there's a step 1, there of course would be a step 2. In step 2, we regularly need what's called co-partners. And so each night at step 2, we're going to come together, have a community moment, share our joys, share announcements, And then we're going to go into a module and learn about budgeting, relationships, wellness, leadership. And then after that, the folks, as they've processed this information, are going to meet with what's called that co-partner to talk with them about their goals, how their budget sheets are going, what they're trying to mobilize and move for that phase. So this is part cheerleader, part person who really cares about them to ask questions, and really kind of that space that's a little bit of kind of a rock and a support to them as they are making their moves in step 2. And so having that volunteer means the participant always has a safe space that they can go to talk about vulnerable things like why the budget's working, why the budget's not working, what they want to do with their children for the summer school programs, how they want to advance in their career. And you get to be that space, that kind of very safe, sensitive space where they process through that and find wisdom and share their ideas and hopes.
Yes. And next is Elevate. So this is our newest of our programs. This is a program where our volunteers are able to get enrolled into school and take short-term certification courses, which will allow them to either start on a career path, gain livable wage employment, or progress in the career that they are already in. So the program is used to fill in skill gaps, basically. Where volunteers fall into this is helping them with the financial advisement aspect of the program. So one benefit of our program is that we do provide our participants with a monthly stipend, and we want them to be able to budget this money while they have it, and also budget the funds that they already have. So when the extra funds are gone, they're not in panic mode from losing that extra monthly income. So you would be somebody who helps them with the budget, helps them with just reaching their financial goals while they're also getting that certification to help them reach their career goals. So it's just the cheerleader, basically, like Tim said, in their corner and telling them that they can do it, they can save this money that they're getting, and they can budget and be able to leave the program in a better financial space and also better career path.
Thank you, Kashmir. The last program we have is Step 3, which again is going to volunteering look a lot like mentorship and helping people complete what's called a passion project that's focused on making their neighborhood, community, or city better. So it's very broadly defined, but you get to be a brainstorming partner with them in that. And so beyond Step 1, Step 2, and Step 3, we will occasionally have needs for data volunteers to help us ask questions of like, who are we serving well? Who are we missing out? What's not happening in the services that we're offering? So helping us ask the best kinds of questions, sort through our data, sort through those reports, occasional help with development and fundraising. Who do you know in your network, or are there major events that you can help contribute to? So those would be the central volunteer needs that we have. However, if you have a skill or a talent that you're like, I don't even necessarily know what to do with it, we'd love to have coffee with you, go out to lunch, talk about where that might be able to fit and how that could be a support. Because we know if you have a gift, it's meant to give to others, and we would love to see that flourish. So thank you so much, community. Thanks, Cash, for sharing all those opportunities and for the great work that you do. And we look forward to meeting all of you and hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
So I hope some of us will take advantage of some of those opportunities offered by Step Up. And if you have other interests, make sure to go on to the 2500 Hours of Love website. You'll find other opportunities as well. So now, in celebration of Black History Month, which, as many of you know, began for the month of February, we now have the story for all ages, which is The Undefeated by spoken word artist and poet Kwame Alexander. It is actually read by Kwame Alexander, and many of you might recognize him as the poet at large for NPR.
Would you mind giving us a little flavor of the book by reading from it?
I get to read it?
You do? Would you like him to read it?
Y'all want to hear it?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to stand up for
That's
this.
great.
This is The Undefeated. Oh, we have it up here. Yes. Hello out there. Glad you all could join us. If you have the book, you can follow along in your text, or you can see it on the screen. This is for the unforgettable, the swift and sweet ones who hurdled history and opened a world of possible. The ones who survived America by any means necessary, and the ones who didn't. This is for the undeniable, the ones who scored with chains on one hand and faith in the other. This is for the unflappable, the sophisticated ones who box adversity and tackle vision, who shine their light for the world to see and don't stop till the break of dawn. This is for the unafraid, the audacious ones who carried the red, white, and weary blues on the battlefield to save an imperfect union. The righteous marching ones who sang, "We shall not be moved because Black lives matter." This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unlimited, unstoppable ones, the dreamers and the doers who swim across the big sea of our imagination and show us the majestic shores of the promised land. The Wilma Rudolphs, the Muhammad Alis, the Althea Gibsons, the Jesse Owenses, the Jordans and the LeBrons, the Serenas and the Cheryls, the Reese Whitleys and the undiscovered. This is for the unbelievable, the we real cool ones. This is for the unbending, the black as the night is beautiful ones. This is for the underdogs and the uncertain, the unspoken but no longer untitled. This is for the undefeated. This is for the undefeated. This is for you and you and you, Jamie, and you, Imogen. This is for you. This is for us.
Is one powerful story. One powerful story. What a good story for this morning. I just have an introduction here to what's coming next. I wanted to just say that this month, Unitarian Universalists who are using soul matters in many congregations are all exploring what it means to widen the circle. We're guided in this by a major recent report from the UUA after a hiring controversy shockingly exposed our collective institutional bias and discrimination and racism. It was a very significant moment in our history, one too precious to miss. And so the UUA board appointed a commission to analyze what happened, to put it into a theological and ethical context, and then to make recommendations for how we can move forward together in more ethical ways that show the world who we truly are and what we truly believe in, so that we can be that ourselves. So Andrew Dine Jones has a reading for us this morning from Widening the Circle Now. Thanks, Anne.
Welcome. A word about centering. The patterns and habits of white supremacy culture are often unacknowledged, unrecognized, or openly denied. When we understand how these patterns and habits affect those who hold power, and especially those who are harmed by them, we then also come to understand that we can't dismantle systems of oppressive behavior without leaning into the knowledge and perspective of those most affected. While proximity may not always guarantee expertise, It does guarantee experience and often greater discernment due to higher personal stakes. Honoring this experience and discernment will require that we cultivate compassion. And it would help to look at the etymology of the word. Calm, meaning with or together, and passion, derived from patai, which means endure, undergo, experience. Can we feel what one another experiences? This perspective offers us a more sensitive and sophisticated understanding of the oppressions that we are all dealing with in our work. Some have taken the idea of centering the leadership of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color, and minimized it to a simple process wherein white or white identified people express a desire for collaboration while avoiding the work that only they are in a position to do. Or even worse, they have misrepresented that suggestion to enmesh beleaguered Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color within their communities in inequitable and toxic systems of labor, responsibility, and accountability. While we recognize that some use the suggestion to center people of color as a tactic of avoidance, we also understand that for some, the line between unequal labor dynamics and inappropriate control is occasionally unclear, especially when circumstances call for rapid action. When we lean into the idea of centering the leadership of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color rather than following it, understanding that following may be necessary, we find a path. By centering, we mean a leaning toward a prioritizing of perspective, attention to whose needs are considered and who is most affected. Just as we can understand that the current paradigm of white dominance centers white identity and the comfort of white identified people, we can also understand that a more just and effective system would center the comfort, safety, growth, agency, and capacity for self-realization of those who are currently most oppressed, which would have a benefit for all.
That widening of perspective is so thrilling. It's just absolutely thrilling. And we're going to come back to that. Actually, we're going to explore that a little bit by a different path. So the path I want to take this morning is I want to think about the James Webb telescope, because that space station is just an amazing blend of sophisticated technology and elegant ancient origami techniques. It's now 1 million miles from Earth, shielded from the blistering bombardment of the sun's particles by those beautiful unfolding shields. Amazing. And it's ready now to look out into deep space and beam those pictures back to Earth. It is still an astonishing mystery to me that when we look out into deep space, what we're actually doing at the same time is we're looking back in time. Because the telescope is looking at stars that are so far away. The light that carries their images has taken millions, sometimes even billions of years to get to us. And so what we're seeing in contemporary time is truly the ancient story of the cosmos. And while that can just blow your mind in the same ways that magic and miracle stories once upon a time maybe amazed people, these origin stories of the stars and the galaxies are also obviously important in terms of science. With each new piece of information, scientists learn more about the universe and how it began, and more about life itself. We can apply that more accurate information to our daily world now, and we can also make plans for the future with greater awareness and greater accuracy when we have more accurate information. People from around the world have always looked out at the stars and hung stories on them as well. Stories about bears and bulls, warriors and twins, and so many more figures. And those stories always helped people know good ways to live. For instance, for hundreds of years, Polynesian people looked up at the stars, and they looked at that part of the zodiac which Greek astronomers had called Scorpius. And the Polynesians saw something different. They didn't see a scorpion, but what they saw was rather not an animal with a tail, but a fishhook, one belonging to the demigod Maui. So Maui, in their stories, had this magical fishhook, Manaia Kalani, the magical fishhook. Manaia Kalani could bring up anything from the sea for Maui. So the story goes that one day Maui and his brothers set out to sea, and Maui cast his line into the depths of the ocean. He tricked his brothers into thinking that he had caught a really big fish, and thinking that he got them to paddle as fast as they could so that he could reel in his line. And as they sped through the ocean, Maui pulled up islands from the sea so that humans could have a place to live. And so these stories, we can see, are not just about what's out there and the stars and the drama overhead. These stories also answer big human questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? What do we need to do to thrive? What do we need to do to avoid danger? And over time, we began to closely associate our identity with these stories and with these images. And some people come to know that they are the people who live on the islands hauled up from the sea by the god Maui. And they give thanks, and they live in relationship with Maui. They make certain offerings at particular times of the year in order to maintain a good relationship with the god. All of this helps them stay in balance with each other and with the earth. All myths and sacred stories help people everywhere do the very same thing. Science offers us a different understanding of the universe, and it offers us a new and more expansive opportunity of what it means to be human now, what our place in the universe is, and how we got here. And we find ourselves less bound to a specific geography, whether it's particular islands in one part of the South Pacific or anywhere else on Earth. However, we now are living in a very anxious time when old cultural stories have lost their power to guide us. And we haven't fully invested new stories with the power to help us find good ways to live in balance with the great forces around us. For instance, we're living in an age of information and new technology, but for the past nearly 200 years, Western cultural myths haven't been able to offer us any adequate guidance about how to live in balance with nature. Since the innovations of the industrial era, we're still trying to catch up with the impact of huge machinery and belching smokestacks, let alone nanotechnology available right here and in smaller devices. And so for a long time, one of the impacts of this is that we haven't known how to manage things like the wealth gap between rich and poor. And that gap has become even more entrenched. Our Western myths also no longer provide us guidance about our impact on the earth. Our myths can't tell us when we're approaching, or that in fact we've passed the point where it's safe to release carbon into the atmosphere. When they're developed, myths tell us about relationships and our place in those relationships. Today, science might be better able to help us understand the contextual reality that will support good relationships and healthy limits now. However, if all we do is interpret those facts through the relationships that we're currently aware of, through the voices and the vision of the people who currently have the stage and the power, we're likely to still miss out on some really key ways that the information fits together. There's something about the James Webb Telescope's ability to look back in space and time that reminds me of what Reverend Jacqueline talked about in her sermon 2 weeks ago about the importance of the Sankofa symbol of the Akan people of Ghana, which reminds us to look back before we try to move forward. As the Webb telescope looks back to capture important information about the origins of our universe, a story that we could partially witness until now, the information it generates will impact how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe now and in the future. This is the essence of Sankofa. Both the telescope project and the work of Sankofa add to and enlarge and enrich the story that we already know. But even this is not enough to point us toward a truly life-saving story, an engaging myth that can support us in this time. Because if we only rely on information about what we already know how to do, it's not going to help us very much. If that information comes through people who already are looking and working, it's not going to help us. For example, in recent years, our Unitarian Universalist Association was shocked into awareness of how locked in we have been into a single story, a monoculture that can only take in and act on the perspectives of people who are steeped within and proficient at white cultural norms. And that our system actually punishes, our liberal religious system actually punishes Black, Indigenous, and people of color when they add their perspectives. In this congregation, we're becoming increasingly aware of the very real dangers that come of only being guided by a single story, a single narrative. And we're beginning to experience how it's true that we actually need each other's perspectives, our different ways of understanding, our different wisdom. We need each other in order to survive. It's not a song we sing, it's a reality that we sing about. In the reading this morning from Widening the Circle, we heard about a specific practice, which is to center the voices and contributions of those who've been most impacted by injustice as a way to counteract this dominant narrative. What the people who are most impacted know from hard-won experience is critically important information that we all need in order to survive. We all need to use our compassion to change who we listen to and what we do with that information. This isn't about flipping a hierarchy and putting the oppressed group on top and just changing around who's on top. It's about making a circle it's a circle of participation that is equitable and wide and inclusive. We're all in it together. We need new practices, though, such as centering, so that we can truly become accomplished at this. We can't just go from a hierarchy to horizontal, wide circles. We have to learn how to do this. So we practice centering as a way to learn. Because When we do that, we get a new view from where we currently are now. We gain a new capacity. In an era when we have outrun the guiding power of our wisdom sources, the Webb telescope could provide us with very good, very useful information, especially if we're wise enough not just to filter our facts into our current storehouse of information, but if together we create art and poetry and myths and stories like the Undefeated. Oh man, that's a great story. If we just together create stories that can help us maintain good, healthy relationships with each other and the earth itself, that's what we need to do now. Our best chance of success at this would be to center the voices and contributions of the people who have been most impacted by past efforts to exclude them. And if all of us work toward the future in equitable, good ways together. We're going to come back to this in a moment. Reverend Brett has some thoughts that she's going to share with us. But in this moment, I want to invite us all to take a breath and join together in the spirit of spoken meditation and quiet meditation and prayer. These are the words of Christine Walters Paintner. She says, that first moment, explosion and fire and fury, a stampede of suns, light poured into the dark chalice of space, sparks wheel across the dome overhead. We look to the inky sky to track creatures formed there, crab and scorpion, lion and bear, stars which died 1 million years ago, still throbbing with impossible light. When I close my eyes, I see them still, and it seems they reach to me and I to them. Is it gravity? Or a long kindled stardust within me? Or is it the doorway to forever? Let's take a moment to ponder that great mystery. Spirit of life and love pulsing through all the cosmos, you unite us with all living beings everywhere. And this morning we hold in our hearts the people of the Ukraine, whose resilience is stunningly strong and also stretched thin after years of their neighbors' aggression. We hold in our hearts this morning all of our elected officials, especially those who have lost sight of the key principles and commitments that they once swore to uphold. May we find the strength, wisdom, and positive, effective ways to hold them accountable for the well-being of our democracy. This morning, we lift up all in our congregation and in our families who are managing major medical conditions with courage and grace, especially Trish Barron, Diane Blount, and Susan and Maury Spitzer. This morning we hold also Kat Moran and her family in our hearts as they mourn the unexpected death of Kat's brother, Rains. We hold Joan Tillman and her family as they celebrate the life of her brother, Jerome. And Jean O'Barr as she supports her sister Betty in her last days in hospice care. This morning we rejoice that the members of this congregation have elected a new lead minister, Reverend Jacqueline Brett. We pray for her continued wisdom and strength as she turns her vision, and all of us too, toward the future that is so full of promise. Bless her, Spirit of love, and all the people of this fellowship, members and friends alike. Keep us well and able to respond to the world's great needs with courage, love, and grace. With gratitude for all that supports us, that makes our lives possible, beautiful, and good, and with commitment to our principles and all that calls us into service, we say Amen, Ashe. May it be so.
There's so much to appreciate, even when the world seems out of hand. Even when we do not understand, still there's so much. Ooh, ba-ba, ba-ba, there's so much, so much that is wonderful, even in the temptation to breathe. Let us take a moment just to breathe. Recognize there's so much. Ooh, ba-ba, ba-ba, there's so much to be grateful for. So much peace, love, and change. There's a chance that something new begins. And don't you want that so much? Oh, there's so much. I know we need it so much. So much. So much.
In 2009, the novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie gave what is now a famous TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story, in which she brought to our conscious awareness the idea of how single stories narrow our view. And when you add political and cultural power and dominance, that they can be pervasive in how they misinform, negatively influence, and can manipulate our relationships with others. And this is not only true in general in the culture today, but it is also evident in the history of our country and our UU denomination, especially when we make a conscious decision to center the stories of those who have not held political, economic, and cultural power, such as in this month, when we celebrate Black history, ultimately the centering of a particular facet of American history, which allows us to expand its single story as we learn more about our collective story. And in future months, we will center women, Latinx, Asian, and Indigenous folks. It's important that we do so because we can all fall prey to a single story, as Adichie points out in her own life. Even when we believe we're trying to help, holding a single story can bring great harm to those whose lived experiences, perspectives, and insights we have made assumptions about or have not taken the time to be in relationship with, and sincerely considered that perhaps they just might have a view, perspective, insight, and wisdom that differs from what we are so certain that we know. In an unconscious zeal to assist, we can actually be unhelpful and even oppressive when our actions are based upon a single story. Science, for all its objectivity, can become quite subjective and life-diminishing when approached from the lens of a single story. The disparities in our healthcare system for Blacks and other people of color across the economic spectrum is but one example, whether we're talking about childbirth or COVID. What I find so compelling about the James Webb Telescope is that if all continues to go well, it will reveal a story of our past and our origins that impacts all of humanity. I am most curious about how the many and diverse people of the earth will make meaning of the James Webb discoveries. Of course, not all will learn of its discoveries, but for those who do, who and what will be considered as that story starts to get told? And whose story will become the most pervasive story? And in what ways might that single story impact us all? Over the past 3 days, I was at the winter board meeting of the UU Service Committee, which, as many of you are aware, focuses on global human rights and justice. During our meetings, we met with two of the most amazing young people I've ever met. They are focused on youth and young adult-led climate action. They are Black, brown, and indigenous people whose approach is to expand the story that we in so-called developed nations know about climate change by amplifying the stories that are most unseen and unheard. And yet, these are also the stories of those who are most directly impacted by the very real devastation of land degradation and climate-forced displacement around the world. Ineza Umuhoza Grace is from Rwanda and is a leader of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, a coalition of global youth from 45 frontline countries who make use of social media, blogs, podcasts, video, and who participate in COP, the annual UN Climate Change Conference, to tell their stories of how they and their people are experiencing loss and damage due to climate change, as well as climate-forced displacement. They use science to advocate for themselves. For instance, they know that temperatures in nations like Rwanda have increased far higher than the global average, and that it's not driven by the actions of their people, as the people in the least developed countries emit 35 times less carbon than those in high-income nations like ours. I was happy to learn about our partnership with this intrepid group of young people, and that UUSC was the first organization to support their efforts financially. Joseph Sekulu of Tonga is an activist leader of the Pacific Client Warriors, a group of 5,000 youth and young adults from 17 Pacific Island countries. You might recognize Tonga as the island nation that recently experienced a volcanic eruption which resulted in a tsunami. Joseph says his people are doing all right. When we talk about the notion of the single story, Joseph notes that the Pacific narrative about climate change was not led by those on the ground and directly impacted, but by media that portrayed Pacific Islanders as helpless victims that needed saving. These young people wanted nothing of that. They decided to reclaim their power by using the word warriors as reflected in their culture rather than this notion of victim. The slogan for their organizing efforts is, "We are not drowning, we are fighting." Rather than experiencing themselves as victims of climate change, they view themselves as leaders in climate action. They have stories to tell about the answers they have, driven by traditional knowledge, wisdom, and innovations, such as those that led the island nation Tokelau which has the smallest economy of any sovereign nation in the world, but is a leader in renewable energy, being the first to be 100% solar powered as a nation in the entire world. What was quite significant for me was that when one joins Pacific Climate Warriors, activist training begins with training in storytelling, out of the belief that the ability to tell your story for yourself is key to connecting with people. Joseph also said that there is nothing better than telling one's story for the greater good of all. As I listened to the stories these people told, I was struck by three things. First, these are people not separated from, but deeply connected to the preciousness of the earth. They rely heavily upon the land. In fact, in Tonga, the word for land and people or human is the same word. Second, I learned through their stories that though their situation appears most devastating to us, these people have no desire to live anywhere else. They want to preserve their land, their people, and their culture for future generations. And finally, I was most profoundly struck that these young people are not sitting in despair. They are determined in their action and are working to get our attention so that we too can get serious and determined about taking action. They inspired the hearts of those of us on the UUSC board as we listen to how these young folks are engaged in this effort as a matter of very real urgency, because their lives and the lives of their people depend upon it. And ultimately, our lives depend upon it too, if we would only listen to the stories we do not already know. The wisdom of Sankofa is that we're not simply going back to get some old stories and myths of the past so that we can continue to do what was always done. We look back into our past to glean insight and understanding that will allow us to co-create our now, this present moment, and our future anew. And how much more powerful that all becomes when we expand our single story, whatever it might be, by listening to one another's stories. Then together we might look back at the stars that then turn forward toward our horizon. Whether it is about climate change, injustice anywhere, or being in beloved community, may we become more keenly attentive in our listening. May we become humble in centering the stories of those most impacted by oppression and devastation. May we be willing to learn and join in co-creating a new story together. Amen, Ashe, and may this be so. All that is seen and experienced in this community is due to the generosity of time, talent, and treasure contributed by our members, and also our friends and visitors who appreciate what they experience here and want to see it continue to flourish and thrive. At this time, we'll take up the morning offering, and you'll see a link in the chat box that will lead you to our secure giving portal. And if it's easier for you, feel free to send your offering in by mail. Meanwhile, we'll continue with our offertory presented by one of our youth, Helena Silva.
We give thanks for all the gifts of time, talent, and treasure so generously given that help to create this vibrant community that seeks to make a difference in the world. Our final hymn this morning is The Ceaseless Flow of Endless Time. The words will be on your screen, and you can sing along wherever you are.
The ceaseless flow of endless time, no one can check or stay. We'll view the past with no regret, nor future with dismay. The present slips into the past, and dream like melts away. The breaking of tomorrow's dawn begins anew today. The past and future ever meet in the eternal now, to make each day a thing complete shall be our New Year's vow.
That song is great for not just a new year, but any time any group of people has stepped over a threshold together into a new day, as this congregation so has joyfully recently done. Bravo. Our closing words this morning are by Kimberly Quinn Johnson. She says, "We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are not perfect, but we are perfectly fitted to this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest to face our past as we chart a new future."
We are the ones we have been waiting for. May we be bold and courageous to chart that new future. May we have faith in the future that is not known. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. Go in love, go in peace, and may your life be a blessing.